over the weekend, Indiana basketball, while Indiana football was off with the bye, Indiana basketball not exactly kicking off their season, but an exhibition of sorts. So they are kicking it off and looked pretty good. We didn't know what to expect from a lot of different places. You get the start with Malik Renault in place of an injured Trace Jackson Davis. And man, did he deliver a double-double in his first start. And I think that may have opened up some eyes for a lot of fans who probably have not seen Malik Renault play because of it coming from down in Montverde. But man, oh man, not much drop off from this quote unquote second unit, if you want to call it that.
Well, he of course started the game in place of Trace Jackson Davis, who was out with a hand injury, and they're being cautious with it. It's not a serious long-term type thing, so there's nothing concerning in that regard right now for Trace. But to start in that position, to go 7 of 10 and score 14 points and pull down 11 rebounds, that's pretty impressive for a freshman to come in and do that. And Jalen Hood-Schifino was the highest-ranked incoming recruit in the Big Ten. He was just as impressive with his performance in this ball game. He had 11 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 4 assists in the ball game. Just looks as calm and cool out there as you can imagine for a freshman. And, he looks like he's a veteran already. So there were some really positive things out of this game. And then we got to talk about Logan Duncombe, who was almost probably nobody knew who he was because last year he hardly got any playing time. In fact, my wife goes, "Who was that kid?" I said, "Who's the guy with the mullet out there?" And they said, "Well, that's a kid from Cincinnati who was a freshman last year and didn't get much of an opportunity. But he comes in and gets 11 points and 11 rebounds and looked terrific doing it." Now, again, it's against an NAIA school, but a very good one. At that, I mean, Marian is a really talented team in their level of play. And Scott Hetty does a tremendous job of coaching these kids. And their program is one of the best in the NAIA circles. They've made the NAIA tournament the last 5 straight years. They'll make it again this year based on what we saw against Indiana. So at any rate, it was just a good first outing for this basketball team, a great opportunity to see guys play for the first time together with this group and play somebody else. Now the coaches have film to talk about, hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, to give them a little crap in regard to how they performed out there. But in truth, for a first exhibition ball game, I thought this team really played well.
And on that note, Don, I thought that the shooting, which has been a topic of conversation now for a couple seasons, typically in those first games, the shooting can be a little bit off. You're just getting your legs underneath of you. You're playing a new opponent for the first time, even if it is an NAIA team. Race Thompson, 3 of 4 from the three-point line. CJ Gunn comes in 2 of 3. They shoot, I think, 42 or 43%, 52% from the floor. I mean, one game sample size, obviously too early to tell, but I think in your first game to shoot over 50% from the floor, over 40% from three-point range, and the guys who were connecting on those shots, right, to me, gives you a lot of optimism heading into the regular season that maybe this team has fixed some of those shooting concerns.
Well, you hope so. There's no question against the competition that they're playing against. It doesn't give you a real strong feeling that that's how it's going to be all year long, but you see improvement there. And there's no question last year in games against outside competition, we wouldn't see something like that. I mean, the one game that we did last year, the Syracuse ball game where Miller Kopp went off for 28 points and Parker Stewart had 20. We didn't see that kind of shooting the rest of the year. So honestly, to see it in the first game against whoever it's against is a plus. And Xavier Johnson, who's been lighting it up in practices throughout the summer and through the fall practice sessions, he had a poor shooting ball game. I think he was just 2 of 11?
11, yeah.
Yeah. So he didn't shoot it well at all. And Miller Kopp only took 1 3. So hopefully that changes too, because I think that guy has to be able to put up at least 5 or 6 3-point shots in a ball game and hopefully knock down 3 or 4 of them.
And I think it's good to see, though, that he didn't force things, Don. The fact that he did only do that, and so learning how to work within the offense, just looking at the numbers, I'm like, yeah, but you definitely he's the guy that you expect to be the one taking those shots. But he seemingly relaxed. But that was the thing that struck me about this team, is they all looked so relaxed with each other. They looked comfortable with each other. Obviously, there's a comfortability with Malik Renaud and Jalen Hood-Schifino, but they all looked comfortable playing together. It looked very smooth.
Let me correct one thing you're doing here, and I did it myself until I saw the pronunciation. It's Renew.
Renew, that's right.
Renew.
I heard. It might have been you. I heard say it too, and I'm like, daggone it! I got to keep his. It's Renew, not Renaud.
Yeah, it's
Thank
Renew,
you.
and I said Renaud probably up until like a week ago. Of course, I wasn't on the air doing it, but nevertheless, I looked at the pronunciation guide, and it's Renew.
I heard someone say that, actually. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So it is. It's Malik Renew, and like I said, you're right. The chemistry that this team showed in this first matchup was really interesting. These kids seem to get along with one another, like one another. And here's the other thing that I thought was a huge positive, and perhaps it's the competition that they played. But let's face it, when you hold a team to 25% shooting, that indicates a pretty strong effort at the defensive end of the floor. And we know that Mike Woodson, that's the first emphasis he has going into practice each year, is you got to be good at the defensive end if you want to play on our basketball team. And that defense showed up in a big way in this first matchup with Marian. And again, the sample size is not very good at this point and is not going to be for a while yet. But to play that tough defensively in your first matchup, whoever you're playing against, I think that's hugely important.
And to that point, did they grab 50 rebounds? It was close. I don't know what the final tally was.
They had 48.
48, so they were close. And that's not obviously a huge stat at this juncture in the season, but I think what that speaks to is that these kids were ready to get out there and play. They were playing hard, because rebounding is a lot of times it's just effort, especially in this type of game. So to go out there, and maybe it's kind of a ho-hum stat in this type of ball game, but at the same time, when you out-rebound your opponent by that much and you're approaching 50 boards and playing defense as well as you said, Don, to me, that shows that this team was hungry to get back on the basketball court. They were putting forth effort, knowing it's an exhibition game. They're setting the tone to head into this season. So, again, you don't know from a one-game sample size, but I think there's a lot of reason for optimism based on what you saw.
Right. There's no question. I mean, that to me is what's important. There should be optimism about this basketball team. And it looks like a team that has the pieces. It's got all the pieces that they need to be a major factor this year in a run for a Big Ten title and perhaps a big run in the NCAA tournament. But again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We just want to sit here and enjoy the moment and think that we've got a team that could be special. And that's very possible.
CJ Gunn is a kid that I've talked about a lot in the offseason, because I watched him in high school, watched him do things. And I'm like, all right, I don't know if that will translate to college, but he is not afraid to take a shot. And he hit 2 of 3 from deep yesterday. And that is a great positive sign, because he's a freshman. He's not a kid that you're going to expect to stand out, get out there and do a lot, but he did. And his confidence is as high as I think it was maybe not in high school, but he feels good. And I think all these guys have a very confident game.
Yeah, I think that's right. Caleb Banks was the only freshman we didn't see get a lot of playing time in this ball game, and he was 0 for 3 when he did get in there. He saw less than 10 minutes of playing time, but he is a terrific athlete and a guy that is still learning the system, still trying to understand what his responsibilities and his role will be in this basketball team. I think he'll come along as well. And the other thing is, the Trey Galloways in this ball club and the Jordan Geronimos, the guys that have been around a while, they're going to help this team immensely. The second unit on this basketball team, when we assume that Renew will be in that grouping, is maybe exactly what Mike Woodson's been hoping to have at the college level, like you had in the NBA, like able to put in 4 or 5 guys, totally different. And maybe play cohesively and be able to take this team to the next level, so to speak. Because last year when he did that, when he put in 3 or 4 guys at a time, it seemed to everything's kind of stepped back, and it wasn't nearly as good as you had hoped it would be. I think the talent level now with these other guys and the experience level that these other guys have coming off the bench is really going to help this second unit be something special.
Not only with the second unit, but I think one of the things Mike Woodson talked about in the offseason, and I think it was at Indiana's media day specifically, was, if I put you in 3 or 4 minutes, you better be ready to play, because if we get in a situation later down the road and you didn't perform or you weren't ready to go, you may not get back in. I think that you see this team taking that to heart. Those aren't just words. They've got enough depth where you might have a guy like, I'm just going to use him as an example, Trey Galloway. One game might play 12 to 15 minutes. Another game he might play 3 to 4. But I think what we saw over the weekend was those guys are taking advantage of the minutes they're getting, the opportunity to show what they can do, because they want to build that trust with Mike Woodson. I just think there's a lot of, you guys, Jim and Don, you both talked about the cohesiveness. They look like they're playing well together. I think they've had some healthy competition throughout the off season. And I think that's just built them. They all have a main goal, right? And that's to be at the top of the Big Ten. And I just think that what Mike Woodson has instilled in this team has changed their attitude for the better.
Well, there's no doubt. This is year 2. I mean, Mike now he's got his system in place. The guys that are back, and there's a bunch of them, all know that system. It's just going to be more cohesive, and it's going to be easier for these guys for the young guys to incorporate themselves with this ball club, because they've got all these older guys telling them exactly what Mike wants, that type of thing. It's for the entire coaching staff and for the team itself. It's just going to be a better feel to it this year in the sense of the experience level and what is expected of them all.